The fluorescent lights of New York Presbyterian flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the quiet hallway. Sarah Whitmore, 8 months pregnant and exhausted from another sleepless night, tried to steady her breathing as the ultrasound technician stepped out for a moment. She placed a hand over her belly, whispering to her son, "Just a few more minutes, sweetheart." But peace wasn't meant for her. Not today. The door burst open so violently that the handle slammed into the wall. Ivy Maddox stormed inside in designer heels, her perfume hitting the room before she did. Her eyes were sharp, furious, manic, and right behind her was Blake, Sarah's husband, his arms folded, a cruel smirk stretched across his face. "There she is," Ivy spat, the pathetic little wife still pretending she matters. Sarah froze. Her heart kicked hard, her breath catching. She tried to stand, but Ivy closed the distance first. Fingers like claws tightened around Sarah's wrist. "I told you to disappear," Ivy hissed, "but you just don't listen." "Ivy, stop," Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'm pregnant, please." "Oh, I know," Ivy replied, her lips twisting into a wicked smile. "That's exactly why this will feel so good." Before Sarah could even register what was happening, Ivy drew her arm back and drove her fist straight into Sarah's stomach. Pain exploded through her body. The room spun. She cried out, collapsing to her knees as the baby kicked violently inside her. And Blake, her husband, the man she thought she loved, laughed. A cold, heartless laugh that cut deeper than any punch. The nurse outside shouted for security. Footsteps thundered down the hall, and Sarah felt herself fading. Her vision blurred, her pulse slowing. Then she sensed a presence. A man standing in the doorway. Older. Powerful. Staring directly at Blake and Ivy, not with shock, but with recognition. Sarah didn't know him, but he knew her. And he said one chilling sentence that made Blake's smile instantly disappear. "Step away from my niece. Now." For most of her life, Sarah Whitmore had become an expert at pretending she was fine, even when she wasn't. She was the kind of woman people overlooked. Quiet, warm, steady. A woman who carried burdens without complaint, who learned long ago that raising her voice never changed anything. At 29, she coordinated patient schedules at New York Presbyterian, juggling emergencies with a tired smile. Colleagues admired her kindness. Patients adored her gentle hands. But no one knew the truth behind those soft eyes. Sarah lived in constant survival mode. Every morning she woke before dawn in the small apartment she shared with Blake, her husband of 4 years, tiptoeing so she wouldn't annoy him. She brewed his coffee the exact way he liked. 2 sugars, no cream. If she forgot, he'd call her careless. If she tried to talk about her day, he'd sigh loudly until she apologized for taking up space. It wasn't always like that. Blake used to be sweet, attentive, charming in that polished Manhattan way. But the moment Sarah became pregnant, everything shifted. Suddenly her swollen ankles were disgusting, her cravings annoying, her worries dramatic. And whenever she asked why he didn't touch her anymore or why his phone was always face down, he'd accuse her of being paranoid. Then came the financial control. Slow, subtle, suffocating. Her name was removed from their joint account by mistake. Her debit card stopped working. Bills she thought he'd paid mysteriously disappeared. And Blake always had the same explanation. "Don't worry, babe, I'll manage everything. You just stay quiet." The loneliness became a second heartbeat inside her chest. But what hurt her most wasn't the money or the insults. It was knowing her baby deserved better. Some nights she would sit on the edge of the bathtub, hand on her round belly, whispering, "I'm trying, I swear I'm trying." But fear always answered back. Fear of leaving, fear of staying, fear of raising a child alone, fear of raising a child with Blake. And then there was the secret Sarah carried alone. Her pregnancy wasn't simple. 2 weeks before the attack, her doctor warned her she was showing early signs of preeclampsia, dangerous swelling, headaches, elevated blood pressure. She needed rest, calm, stability. Blake gave her none of that. Instead, he gave her Ivy Maddox, his glittering, venomous mistress, who had made it her full-time mission to torment Sarah. Ivy sent anonymous messages, left mocking voicemails, once even waited outside Sarah's workplace to smirk at her belly and say, "You know he's leaving you when the baby comes, right? Don't embarrass yourself thinking otherwise." But Sarah endured it all, because she believed things might still get better, that Blake might still remember the man he once was. Because she wanted her child to have a father. because she didn't know she had someone else in this world. Someone powerful who still cared. On the morning of the ultrasound, Sarah told herself it would be a good day. She rubbed her belly, put on her softest sweater, and whispered, "Mommy's here. Mommy's fighting for you." She didn't know that within an hour she would be on a hospital floor, bleeding and terrified. She didn't know Blake would laugh. She didn't know Ivy would strike her with full hatred. And she definitely didn't know that the man who stepped into that room, the man who called her my niece, was about to turn her entire life upside down. Because he wasn't just any man. He was someone Blake should have never crossed. New York has a way of exposing the distance between people, sometimes in miles, sometimes in money, and sometimes in the quiet ache of a life you never meant to settle for. For Sarah Whitmore, that distance stretched like the Manhattan skyline itself, endless, glittering, and full of places she would never be invited into. Blake Harrison lived in that world. His office sat high inside a glass tower on Fifth Avenue, the kind of place with a marble lobby so polished it reflected every insecurity back at you. The elevator ride alone felt like climbing into a universe Sarah didn't belong to. Men in tailored suits, holding leather briefcases, women gliding past in Dior coats and Louboutin heels, phones pressed to their ears as if every conversation changed the world. Blake thrived there. He loved the power of it, the attention, the status, the illusion that he was someone important. His desk faced a panoramic view of Central Park, sunlight dancing off the chrome edges of his awards. A Rolex he couldn't afford gleamed on his wrist. A Mercedes S-Class he didn't own outright waited in the private garage. Ivy often bragged about being picked up from the Ritz-Carlton lobby in their car, never realizing the payments bounced twice before clearing. To Sarah, all of it felt like a movie set, and she was the character written into the wrong script. Their apartment reflected the same imbalance. 2 bedrooms, sleek and modern, perched on the edge of Midtown, expensive enough to look impressive, but suffocating to live in. Every corner carried Blake's voice, his rules, his bitterness. Her things, the baby books, the soft blankets, the framed photo of her mother, were tucked away like clutter he tolerated. The only place Sarah felt a small measure of peace was the hospital where she worked. There, everything made sense. There, she belonged. Yet even the hospital, her refuge, had cracks now. Ivy appeared there once, just to sneer. Blake had shown up another time demanding she leave early to cook dinner for him. The place that once felt safe became another reminder that her world was shrinking. Still, New York has a strange way of placing people exactly where they need to be, even when it looks cruel at first. Because deep inside that same hospital, walking those same halls she crossed daily, another life intersected with hers, but not in the way she expected. Behind closed doors on the 17th floor, a private boardroom existed for the hospital's most powerful donors. Sarah had never seen it, never been invited, never imagined she had any connection to it. The walls were lined with portraits of benefactors, names like Harrington, Rothwell, Hale, especially Hale. A family she once belonged to, a world she once touched only as a child, a bloodline she thought she had lost forever. What Sarah didn't know was that on the day Ivy attacked her, someone very influential happened to be on that same floor. Someone who recognized her face even after all these years. Someone who knew exactly who she was, and who her mother had been. Someone who wasn't going to let Blake or Ivy get away with what they had done. Because while Sarah thought she had no one, the truth was very different. Someone powerful had already begun moving toward her. Before the attack in the hospital, Blake Harrison and Ivy Maddox had already perfected their roles as villains, long before Sarah ever realized she was living with an enemy and being hunted by another. Blake liked to think of himself as a self-made man, but the truth was far less glamorous. His job title, Director of Public Relations, sounded impressive, but anyone who worked with him knew he was a walking disaster. His charm was fake, his work sloppy, his debts enormous. His greatest skill wasn't leadership or strategy, it was pretending. Pretending he was wealthy, pretending he was powerful, pretending he wasn't terrified that one day the whole illusion would collapse. And then Ivy appeared. Ivy Maddox was everything he wanted people to believe he deserved. Glamorous, loud, adored by strangers online. She lived on TikTok and Instagram, building a fantasy life out of designer bags she couldn't afford and hotel lobbies she sneaked into just to take photos. She loved the spotlight, but hated responsibility. Blake became her ticket to the luxury lifestyle she believed she was born for. To her followers, she was a girl boss. To Blake, she was a toy. To Sarah, she was a nightmare. Their affair didn't begin quietly. Ivy wanted noise. She wanted attention. She wanted Sarah to know. She posted cryptic captions, "Some men finally choose the right woman. Winning feels natural. Upgrading season." And Blake allowed it, even encouraged it, as long as Ivy made him feel like he was someone important. He fed her lies about his company shares, his secret investments, his upcoming promotion. In reality, he was drowning financially. Ivy had no idea that the expensive dinners were paid with company credit cards, or that the cufflinks she bragged about were rented, not bought. But Blake did have one thing she wanted: a wife who stood in the way. Ivy despised Sarah, not because of anything Sarah had done, but because Sarah didn't fit Ivy's idea of competition. Sarah was soft-spoken, hard-working, gentle. Ivy needed someone to fight, someone to crush, someone to humiliate. And Blake fed that desire by painting Sarah as clingy, pathetic, and boring. "She's dragging me down," he would whisper into Ivy's neck. "She's too weak to leave," Ivy would answer. "She won't be a problem much longer," Blake promised. Their cruelty bonded them more than love ever could. And as the months passed, their obsession with destroying Sarah grew. Ivy demanded Blake divorce her. Blake insisted he would, after the baby. He didn't want the stress, the legal mess, or the financial responsibility. He wanted Sarah to keep paying the bills and doing the chores while he lived his double life. As long as Sarah stayed quiet, everything worked in his favor. But Ivy wasn't patient. She wanted Sarah gone now. And when she learned about the ultrasound appointment, when she saw the perfect opportunity to confront Sarah alone, she didn't hesitate. She walked into that hospital believing she was untouchable, believing Blake would protect her, believing the world would side with a pretty face and a loud voice. She was wrong. Because there was something Blake never told her. Something Ivy didn't bother to learn. Something that was about to shatter both of their lives. Sarah Whitmore wasn't alone in this world. And the man standing in that hospital doorway, eyes cold as steel, voice sharp as thunder, wasn't just a stranger. He was someone with enough power to bury them both. Chaos erupted the moment Ivy's fist struck Sarah's stomach, but the true explosion didn't happen until seconds later, when the quiet hallway outside their room awoke like a shaken hive. A nurse screamed for security. A doctor pushed past Blake, demanding space. A medical technician sprinted toward the nearest emergency cart. But Blake didn't move. He simply stood with his arms folded over his chest, watching Sarah writhe on the floor with a twisted grin, an expression so cold it burned deeper than any bruise. "Get up," he sneered. "You're embarrassing yourself." Sarah's vision blurred. Her ears rang. Her baby kicked wildly as if trying to escape the pain. She clutched her belly, gasping, "Please, someone help." The ultrasound technician rushed back in and dropped to her knees beside Sarah. "Oh my God, she's pregnant? What happened?" Ivy flipped her hair, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "She slipped. Very dramatic if you ask me." But her hand was still throbbing from the force of the punch, and the technician noticed. Before anyone could respond, a red light blinked to life above the doorway. The hospital's hallway cameras had begun auto-recording. It captured Ivy entering without permission, captured Blake blocking staff from helping, captured every hateful word spilled across the sterile room. Security stormed in next. 2 officers in Navy uniforms. "Sir, step aside," one ordered. Blake lifted both hands, shrugging casually. "My wife fell. People fall. Hospitals should be used to that." The other guard turned to the nurse. "Is this true?" The nurse shook her head so fiercely her ponytail snapped. "No, I saw everything." She attacked her. He laughed. Ivy scoffed. "Who are you going to believe? A minimum wage nurse or me?" But then the automatic emergency report beeped. The system had flagged potential assault on expectant patient, something mandated by state law to be forwarded to the NYPD investigators stationed inside the hospital. It was no longer just an incident. It was a legal case. The hallway filled with whispers as more staff gathered. Hands covered mouths. Someone muttered, "Isn't she 8 months?" Another said, "Call OB now. This could be preterm labor." Blake's face finally tightened. This wasn't going the way he expected. He stepped forward, grabbing Ivy's wrist. "Let's go. Now." But they didn't get far. Because standing at the end of the hallway, tall, commanding, flanked by 2 hospital administrators, was the same man who had appeared in the doorway minutes earlier. The man who called Sarah my niece. Jonathan Hale. Even the security guards stiffened at the name. The Hale family had funded entire wings of the hospital. They weren't just wealthy, they were untouchable. Jonathan's voice echoed through the corridor, low and thunderous. "No one moves." Blake froze. Ivy's bravado evaporated. Jonathan stepped closer, his gaze icy and precise. "The cameras captured everything," he said. "Assaulting a pregnant woman, interfering with medical staff, endangering an unborn child." His eyes narrowed. "You two have no idea what you've just done." Sarah tried to sit up, wincing. Who are you?" Jonathan knelt beside her, his voice softening, for her alone. "I'm here now, Sarah, and I won't let anyone hurt you again." Over his shoulder, he signaled to the security team. "Detain them until the police arrive." Ivy let out a shriek. "You can't do that!" But her words drowned beneath the weight of what Jonathan said next. "You hurt the wrong woman." The moment Blake and Ivy were escorted down the hallway, the adrenaline that had kept Sarah conscious finally drained out of her body. Everything went blurry around the edges. The sterile white ceiling, the rushing footsteps, the muddled voices, they melted together like watercolors soaked in rain. A sharp cramp seized her abdomen. "Please, my baby," she whispered. The nurses lifted her onto a gurney, rolling her toward the high-risk maternity wing. Every bump along the tile floor felt like a tremor inside her belly. Her vision swayed. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The pain wasn't constant, worse. It came in waves, sharp and unpredictable, like her body was trying to hold on while everything else kept pulling her apart. Jonathan tried to follow, but the medical team stopped him at the doorway. "Sir, we need space. Let us stabilize her first." He hesitated. Powerful men rarely heard the word no, but the fear in Sarah's eyes made him step back. Inside the exam room, 3 nurses surrounded her, attaching monitors, inserting IV lines, adjusting oxygen. A fetal heartbeat monitor crackled to life, the rapid rhythm filling the space. Sarah focused on that sound, clinging to it like a lifeline. "Stay with me, little one," she whispered. Her blood pressure was rising fast, too fast. The doctor, Dr. Alara Morton, frowned at the numbers. "She's developing acute stress-induced complications. We need to calm her system before this turns into preterm labor." But how could Sarah calm down? Her baby's life was hanging by a thread. Her husband had betrayed her in the cruelest way. Her body had become a battlefield. The walls felt like they were closing in. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Tears burned down her cheeks without warning. Dr. Morton placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, look at me. You're safe now. We're here. Your baby is still stable." Still stable. For now. Sarah closed her eyes, but images flashed relentless. Ivy's fist, Blake's laugh, the cold tile floor. The fear that this child might never take a first breath. "I can't do this," Sarah sobbed. "I can't raise a baby alone. I have no one." At those words, Jonathan, who had been waiting just outside, stepped into the doorway before anyone could stop him. "That's not true," he said quietly. Sarah looked up, eyes swollen, breath trembling. She barely recognized the man. Broad shoulders, silver hair, eyes full of guilt she didn't understand. "You don't know me," she whispered. Jonathan's voice broke. "But I should have been there. I should have found you sooner." The room fell silent. Even the machine seemed to pause. Sarah's hands shook. Why do you care?" Jonathan swallowed hard, stepping closer. "Because your mother was my sister. Because you're my family. Because you should have never suffered alone." Her breath caught. "What?" But before Jonathan could say more, an alarm beeped sharply. Her contraction monitor spiked. Dr. Morton moved fast. "She's in preterm distress. Everyone focus." Jonathan stepped back, helpless as nurses rushed around Sarah again. Sarah sobbed into her oxygen mask, clutching her stomach. She wasn't ready. The baby wasn't ready. Nothing in her life was stable enough for this moment. She was falling apart from the inside out, and for one terrifying second she thought, "We might not make it." But then the door slammed open again, and a man Sarah had never seen rushed in wearing a white coat, eyes sharp, movements decisive, and the medical staff stepped aside for him. Because this doctor wasn't just anyone, He was the hospital's top maternal-fetal specialist, and he demanded to take over her case. Dr. Evan Cole moved around the room with the sharp efficiency of a man who'd spent years navigating life-and-death moments. His presence alone seemed to steady the chaos. His voice was calm but commanding as he adjusted Sarah's monitors. "Deep breath, Sarah. You and your baby are still fighting. I need you to stay with me." Sarah tried. God, she tried. But the pain, the betrayal, the fear, it all pressed down on her like a crushing wave. Tears blurred her vision again. Jonathan couldn't stand by any longer. He stepped inside despite the nurse's hesitation. "Doctor," he said, his voice thick but controlled, "I'm her uncle. I want updates." Dr. Cole glanced at him briefly, recognition flickering. "Hale?" he murmured. "I've seen your name on half the donor plaques in this hospital." Jonathan didn't answer. His focus was entirely on Sarah. She lay trembling under the fluorescent lights, her cheeks damp, her breathing ragged. She looked nothing like the little girl he used to secretly check up on from afar, not since the day she disappeared from the Hale estate after her mother's funeral. He had searched, he had hired investigators, but grief and anger had clouded everything. By the time he realized the truth, Sarah was already gone. He regretted it every single day. "Sarah," he said softly, taking a careful step closer. "I know you're scared. I know you don't understand what's happening, but you're not alone, not anymore." She stared at him, confusion mixing with fear. Why are you doing this?" Jonathan swallowed hard, his voice wavered for the first time. "Because your mother, Emily Hale Whitmore, was my sister, and I failed her. I failed you." Her breath hitched. Jonathan continued, "When she passed, the family was broken. Your father left, the house split, and in the chaos, I lost you. I never stopped looking, Sarah. Never." She shook her head weakly. No one ever came for me." His face twisted with pain. "I did. But by the time I found out the truth, you'd already changed your name, moved away, disappeared from every record. I didn't know Blake kept you isolated. I didn't know he drained your accounts. I didn't know you were carrying a child under that monster's roof." Her tears flowed freely now. Her voice cracked. "I thought I didn't have anyone." Jonathan knelt beside her bed, his hand gently hovering near hers. "You have me, and I promise you this, Blake Harrison and Ivy Maddox will never hurt you again." The monitors beeped steadily, the baby's heartbeat a frantic echo of life still pushing through. Dr. Cole glanced at the readings and nodded. "Her levels are stabilizing. Whatever you said, keep saying it." Jonathan exhaled shakily, relief washing over his tense shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something right. But deep inside Sarah, a storm was still raging. Her body might be stabilizing, but her heart, shattered, bruised, confused, was barely holding together. She whispered, "What happens now?" Jonathan stood slowly, his expression shifting from grief to something colder, something fierce. "Now," he said. "Now I make sure those two face consequences for every second of pain they caused you." His phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered with a curt, "Report." After a short pause, his jaw tightened. He hung up, eyes sharpening like steel. Then he looked at Sarah and said, "This attack isn't the only crime Blake Harrison committed today." The following morning, sunlight filtered through the tall hospital windows, washing the room in a muted gold glow. Sarah woke slowly, her body still aching but her mind clearer than it had been in months. For the first time since the nightmare began, she didn't wake to Blake's voice blaming her for something she didn't do. She woke to silence, a peaceful silence. Jonathan sat nearby, reading over documents with the quiet intensity of a man used to solving multi-million-dollar crises. His presence filled the room, not suffocating, not demanding, but protective. When he noticed her stirring, he stood immediately. "How do you feel?" he asked gently. "Tired," Sarah murmured, "but lighter." Jonathan gave a small nod. "Good, because today is the first step toward taking your life back." Sarah frowned slightly. "Taking it back? I don't know if I'm strong enough." Jonathan leaned forward, eyes steady. "Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you discover. And Sarah, you survived yesterday? Most people would have broken, but you didn't." The words hit her harder than any insult Blake had ever thrown. She felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her, something like belief. As the nurses checked her vitals, Jonathan made a quick phone call. Minutes later, an elegant woman in a navy suit arrived, carrying garment bags and a sleek silver case. "Sarah," Jonathan said, "this is Eleanor Grant. She runs personal affairs for the Hale family. She's here to help you with anything you need: wardrobe, security, housing, transportation." Sarah blinked. "I don't need all that." Eleanor smiled kindly. "You don't have to need it, you deserve it." Those words stole Sarah's breath. Deserve. A word no one had offered her in years. Over the next hour, Eleanor introduced her to a world she'd forgotten existed. A world where she wasn't dismissed, controlled, or made small. Soft cashmere maternity dresses replaced the worn-out sweaters Blake criticized. Comfortable but elegant flats replaced the shoes she'd worn until the soles thinned. Eleanor even brought gentle skincare products after noticing the stress lines on Sarah's face. For the first time in months, Sarah saw herself in the mirror and didn't flinch. She didn't look broken. She didn't look weak. She looked present. Alive. A woman becoming herself again. Dr. Evan Cole re-entered then, reviewing her charts. "Good news, your levels have stabilized. You'll still need monitoring, but with reduced stress, you and the baby should be safe." Relief spread through her chest like warm sunlight. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, but his gaze lingered. Not clinically, but gently, like someone who cared beyond the stethoscope. Jonathan cleared his throat. "When you're discharged, you won't be going back to Blake. I've already arranged a suite for you at the Hale residence. Full security. No one gets in without approval." Sarah's heartbeat quickened. "The Hale residence? That's too much." "No," Jonathan said firmly. "It's the bare minimum. You're family, and you've been living far beneath the life you were meant for." Sarah felt tears sting, but didn't look away. "I don't know how to start over." "You already did," Jonathan said softly, "the moment you opened your eyes this morning." Sarah exhaled slowly. For the first time, starting over didn't feel impossible. But just as she let herself breathe, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression darkening. She whispered something to Jonathan. His face hardened instantly. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her stomach tightening again. Jonathan turned to her, jaw clenched. "It's Blake. He's trying to sue you, claiming you assaulted Ivy." The moment Jonathan announced Blake's countersuit, the air in the hospital room shifted. The fragile calm Sarah had fought for collapsed like thin ice beneath her feet. Her pulse quickened, fear slicing through her hard-won peace. "He's accusing me?" she whispered, disbelief shaking her voice. "Of assault," Jonathan said, "and emotional distress." Sarah felt dizzy. "But Ivy hit me? They have the video. The doctors saw." "Blake doesn't care about truth," Jonathan cut in. "He cares about control. This is his attempt to regain the upper hand." Dr. Evan Cole placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He won't succeed, Sarah, not with everything documented." But even his steady tone carried a hint of frustration, anger even. Jonathan stepped aside, pulling up an encrypted folder on his tablet. "I anticipated Blake would retaliate in some reckless way," he said. "So I had my team gather everything. Security footage, timestamps, Ivy's online activity, even Blake's financial history." Sarah blinked. "Financial history?" Jonathan nodded once. "Sarah, Blake is not who he pretends to be." With a swipe of his hand, Jonathan revealed spreadsheets, flagged emails, fraudulent transactions, and photos of Blake dining at upscale Manhattan restaurants with Ivy, many of which were paid with corporate funds. "He's been embezzling from his company for over a year," Jonathan said. "Tens of thousands, maybe more." Sarah felt sick. I never knew." "You weren't supposed to," Jonathan replied. "Men like Blake build cages out of silence, and you were trapped in one." Eleanor stepped forward, folding her arms. "We've already contacted a corporate attorney. Blake's company is reviewing our findings. By tonight, internal investigators will open a formal probe." "Internal investigators?" Sarah echoed, eyes wide. "Think of them as corporate bloodhounds," Eleanor said. "They track every misuse of funds, and Blake has left a trail a mile wide." Sarah sank into her pillows, trembling, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming realization that everything Blake built his identity on was collapsing, and she wasn't powerless anymore. She had people in her corner, people who believed her, people who knew the truth. Jonathan continued, "Blake's lawsuit won't reach a courtroom. By the time my legal team responds, he'll have bigger problems." A knock echoed from the doorway. A sharply dressed man stepped inside, a man with a badge clipped to his belt and a briefcase in his hand. Mr. Hale, he greeted Jonathan respectfully. I've reviewed your request. I'm Detective Ramos with NYPD's hospital unit. Sarah stiffened. Am I in trouble? No, Miss Whitmore, Ramos said gently. I'm here on your behalf. We received the mandatory assault report filings. I've watched the footage. Jonathan lifted his chin. And? Ramos opened the briefcase and pulled out official documents. It's indisputable. Ivy Maddox struck a pregnant woman. Blake Harrison obstructed medical staff and incited her. Sarah's breath hitched. So, what happens now? Ramos gave a measured smile. We will be recommending charges. Jonathan exhaled, relieved. Eleanor pressed a comforting hand to Sarah's arm. Even Dr. Cole allowed himself a brief smile. But Ramos wasn't finished. There's more, he said, pulling out a second set of papers. During our review, we discovered additional reports, anonymous ones filed over the past months. Claims of verbal abuse, threats, financial manipulation, all referencing Blake Harrison. Sarah's stomach dropped. Someone had tried to help her before? Who filed them? She asked softly. Ramos shook his head. That's the strange part. They were submitted from encrypted sources. No names. Jonathan's expression sharpened, too sharply. Detective, he said slowly, show me the timestamps. Ramos handed the documents over. Jonathan's jaw tightened as he read. He raised his eyes to Sarah. These weren't filed by strangers. Then who? Sarah began. Jonathan stepped closer. Someone close to Blake, someone who knew exactly what he was doing, filed them. Sarah's discharge day arrived faster than she expected. Her body was still weak, but her spirit, once muted, once buried, was beginning to take shape again. It wasn't confidence yet, but it was a spark. A small, trembling flame refusing to go out. Eleanor arrived early that morning with 2 assistants, garment bags, and a quiet smile that carried more reassurance than words could. Today, she said gently, we restore what Blake tried to take from you. Sarah's breath stilled. She nodded. They helped her out of the loose hospital gown and into a soft, dove-gray maternity dress. Simple, elegant, shaped in a way that honored her body instead of hiding it. A warm cashmere wrap settled around her shoulders. Her hair, brushed and softly curled, framed her face, revealing strength she didn't realize she had. When she finally stood before the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Not the frightened wife, not the silenced victim. Not the girl who walked on eggshells to avoid the next insult. This woman had survived. This woman had endured. This woman was preparing to rise. You look like someone who finally knows her worth, Eleanor said. Sarah swallowed hard. I hope so. You don't need to hope, Eleanor whispered. You just need to remember. Jonathan entered then, stopping mid-stride when he saw her. His expression softened, pride flickering in his eyes. Your mother would have been proud, he said quietly. That broke her a little, but in a good way. Are we ready? Jonathan asked. Sarah took a steadying breath. Yes. As they left the hospital, security escorted them through a private exit. Black SUVs awaited, discreet, powerful, imposing. The world outside felt different now. Less intimidating, more reachable. On their drive to the Hale residence, Jonathan filled her in on developments. Detective Ramos contacted me, he said. Blake is now officially under investigation by his company. They found unauthorized charges totaling more than $78,000. Sarah blinked. $78,000? He told me we were struggling and I needed to cut back. Jonathan's mouth tightened. He weaponized financial vulnerability. Men like Blake use money the way others use fists. She stared out the window, watching Manhattan rush past, the skyscrapers, the streets, the noise. For years, those same streets had made her feel small. Today, they felt like witnesses. You're safe now, Jonathan added. But safety is only the first step. The next is reclaiming your life. At the Hale residence, a towering penthouse overlooking Central Park, Sarah was greeted by warm lighting, fresh flowers, and staff who treated her with quiet respect. The contrast to Blake's cold apartment was overwhelming. This is too much, she whispered. No, Jonathan said firmly. This is the environment you were meant to grow in. He gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. I want you to see what your future looks like, unobstructed. Sarah felt her baby kick gently, as if agreeing. Just as she settled into the plush armchair, Dr. Evan Cole called for an update. You made it home safely? He asked. Yes, she said, unable to hide the small smile forming. I'm glad, he murmured, warmth threading his voice. You deserve good things, Sarah. She didn't know how to respond to that, but she felt it for the first time. Then Eleanor re-entered the room, her expression urgent. "Jonathan," she said, voice low, "we have a problem." Sarah's heart skipped. "What now?" Eleanor handed him a tablet. Jonathan read the screen, his jaw clenched. "It's Blake," he said. "What did he do?" Sarah whispered. Jonathan looked up, eyes dark as stone. "He's disappeared." Blake Harrison had always believed he was smarter than everyone else. Smarter than his coworkers. Smarter than the women he dated. Smarter than the wife he manipulated into silence. But the moment he realized Jonathan Hale was involved, everything inside him cracked. He didn't pack a suitcase. He didn't call his lawyer. He didn't even check on Ivy, who was being processed downtown. He ran. He bolted out of his apartment, grabbing whatever cash he had stuffed into shoeboxes and jacket pockets. He tore down the stairwell because he didn't trust the elevator cameras. Every footstep echoed like a countdown. Damn it, this wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered to himself. Outside, he hailed a cab with shaking hands. "Just drive," he snapped. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Anywhere but here." But Blake learned something quickly. You can run from your wife. You can run from the truth. But you can't run from a billionaire who has resources in every corner of the city. He switched hotels 3 times, first in Midtown, then Queens, then a dingy motel in the Bronx. He paid cash. He avoided cameras. He shaved his beard in the cracked bathroom mirror. But Jonathan's investigators were always one step ahead. By the 3rd day, Blake was pacing the motel room like a trapped animal. His thoughts spiraled out of control. How did she find someone like him? He raged. How is Sarah connected to the Hales? She's nobody. She was supposed to be nobody. He slammed his fist into the cheap drywall, leaving a dent. She owes me. I made her. She was nothing without me. He didn't notice the motel clerk glancing up from behind the counter as Blake stormed past. Didn't notice the clerk quietly picking up the phone. Didn't hear him say, "Yeah, I think I just saw your guy." Back at the Hale penthouse, Sarah sat curled on the velvet sofa, hands resting protectively over her stomach. The baby kicked softly, as if sensing her worry. "Why would he run?" she asked. Jonathan poured himself a glass of water, trying to appear calm. Because men like Blake don't face consequences, they avoid them. Running is all he knows. Eleanor added, "He's terrified, Sarah, not of the police, but of Jonathan." Jonathan didn't deny it. Dr. Evan Cole entered moments later, checking on Sarah's blood pressure. "You need calm, not stress. Stress hurts both of you. So whatever happens with Blake, let Jonathan handle it." Sarah nodded, but couldn't escape the gnawing fear twisting inside her. "What if he tries to come here?" she whispered. "He won't get close," Jonathan assured her. "We have private security and surveillance. The building is locked tighter than the Federal Reserve." But as he said the words, his phone vibrated. A message from one of his private investigators. He opened it. A single line appeared. "We found him." Jonathan stiffened. "Where is he?" Eleanor asked urgently. But Jonathan didn't answer. He turned slowly toward Sarah, concern shadowing his eyes. "Sarah," he said quietly, "there's something you need to know before we bring him in." Her pulse raced. "What is it?" Jonathan hesitated, just long enough to frighten her. Then he exhaled and said, "Blake isn't running because he's scared of being arrested. He's running because he's hiding something. Something he never wanted you to discover." Jonathan Hale had faced corporate sharks, hostile takeovers, foreign investors, and multi-million-dollar scandals. But nothing tightened his chest the way this moment did. Preparing Sarah for the truth Blake had been hiding. Sarah sat quietly on the edge of the penthouse sofa, fingers gripping the soft blanket Eleanor had draped over her knees. Her heart thudded with a familiar fear she couldn't shake, no matter how safe the room felt. What is Blake hiding?" she asked, voice trembling. Jonathan didn't answer right away. He paced once, gathering the right words, then turned toward her. "Sarah, Blake didn't just betray you emotionally. He betrayed you legally." Her throat tightened. "Legally?" Jonathan nodded. "He forged your signature on several documents, financial ones that placed you at risk." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of documents?" Before Jonathan could answer, Eleanor's intercom beeped. "Sir," the security guard said, "your team has Blake Harrison in custody. They've brought him to the private conference room downstairs." Sarah froze. Her breaths came shallow, uneven. "He's here?" Jonathan crouched beside her. "You don't need to see him. But he will face what he's done. My investigators will question him, and Detective Ramos is already on his way. I want to go, Sarah whispered suddenly. Eleanor's eyes widened. Sarah, no, it's too soon. He could upset you. Stress isn't safe for the baby. Sarah clenched her jaw. He's been upsetting me for years, and I'm tired of being afraid. Jonathan hesitated, then finally nodded. If you're sure, we'll go. But I'll be right beside you. They rode the private elevator down, the air thick with tension. Every floor felt like a countdown to a moment Sarah never believed she'd have. Facing Blake Harrison, with power behind her. When the doors opened, 2 of Jonathan's private security officers stood guard. They opened the conference room doors, and Sarah stepped inside. Blake was seated at the far end of a long mahogany table, disheveled, pale, and visibly panicked. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his bravado shattered. The moment he saw Sarah, his eyes widened. Sarah? What the hell are you doing here? She didn't answer. She moved closer, Jonathan beside her like a silent wall of protection. Blake forced a shaky laugh. Look, babe, this is all a misunderstanding. I was gonna come home, I just needed time to think. Jonathan stepped forward, voice cold and surgical. You disappeared. You fled the city. You attempted to file a false lawsuit, and you forged Sarah's signature on financial documents connected to your embezzlement. Blake's face drained of color. You can't prove that. We already did, Jonathan replied. One of the investigators slid a stack of papers across the table. Blake's forged signatures stared back at him, some clumsy, some nearly perfect, all undeniable. Sarah felt anger simmer in her chest, slow and steady. Why did you do it? She asked quietly. Why use my name for your crimes? Blake slammed his fist on the table. Because you owe me. You were supposed to stand by me. You were supposed to help me, not ruin my life. Sarah's breath shook. You ruined your own life, Blake. Jonathan's voice cut through the air. Detective Ramos is on his way. And when he arrives, Blake, this room becomes evidence. Blake's mask finally cracked. He grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles white. You think you can take everything from me? You think she's better than me now? You think she deserves this rich girl fantasy? Jonathan leaned in, eyes sharp. This isn't fantasy, this is justice. Blake snarled. I won't let you take her from me. Sarah inhaled sharply, but before she could respond, the conference room door swung open. Detective Ramos stepped in, flanked by 2 NYPD officers. He looked at Blake. Blake Harrison, we need to talk. But the detective's next words weren't about the assault. They weren't about the embezzlement. They were something far worse. We found something in your motel room. Something you tried very hard to hide. While Blake was cornered in the Hale conference room, Ivy Maddox was fighting her own war miles away, inside a cold, gray NYPD interrogation chamber. Gone was the influencer sparkle. Gone were the lashes, the designer heels, the glossed lips. Ivy sat hunched over the metal table, handcuffed, hair frizzy, mascara smeared like war paint. She had always thought of herself as bulletproof. But the moment the cell door clanged shut behind her, Ivy realized something terrifying. Her power had never been real. It was borrowed, from Blake, from lies, from fantasy. Detective Ramos entered quietly and dropped a folder onto the table. Ms. Maddox, he said, we need to talk about the video. Ivy stiffened. What video? Ramos pressed a button. The screen on the wall lit up. There she was, marching into the ultrasound room, yanking Sarah by the wrist, calling her pathetic, punching her hard, with full intent, all while Blake laughed in the background. Ivy swallowed hard. This is taken out of context. Ramos didn't blink. The context is assaulting a pregnant woman. Her breathing quickened. You don't understand, she said desperately. Blake told me she was dangerous. He said she was faking the pregnancy to trap him. He said she threatened me. Ramos raised an eyebrow. And you believed him? He said he loved me, Ivy whispered. Ramos leaned back, unimpressed. Did he tell you he was under financial investigation too? That he used his company's money to fund your lifestyle? Ivy paled. She looked like she might vomit. No, she croaked. Blake said he was rich. He said everything was his. Everything was stolen, Ramos corrected. And Miss Maddox, your name appears in several of the charges. Trips, jewelry, hotel suites, which means the company may pursue charges against you as well. Her breath hitched. What? No, I didn't know. Maybe, Ramos said. But Blake certainly made sure you looked involved. Ivy shook her head violently. He wouldn't do that. He loves me. He loves me. Ramos opened the second folder. Inside were Blake's private messages, ones he didn't know investigators had recovered. He had bragged to a friend, "Ivy's obsessed, easy to manipulate. When I'm done with her, she'll take the fall." Ivy's lips trembled. He said that?" Ramos nodded. "Blake set you up from the beginning." The truth shattered her. For the first time in months, Ivy realized she wasn't Blake's partner. She wasn't his equal. She wasn't even his preference. She was a pawn. Ramos continued. "Now here's the part you need to hear. The motel room Blake stayed in, we found a hidden folder in the vent. Dozens of documents, logs, screenshots." He paused. "Blake kept evidence of everything you and he have done." Ivy's voice cracked. "Why would he do that?" "To protect himself," Ramos said simply, "which he failed at." Ivy shook uncontrollably. "Detective, am I going to prison?" "That's up to the judge," Ramos said. "But considering the severity, yes, it's very possible." Ivy slammed her cuffed hands on the table. "No, I can't go to prison. You don't understand. I'll lose everything." "You already did," Ramos replied. Tears streamed down her face. Her world, built on fake luxury and stolen glamour, crumbled around her with every breath. "And since you asked," Ramos added, sliding one final photo toward her, "here's what really seals the case." Ivy glanced down and froze. Her hand flew to her mouth. The photo showed Blake, standing in a jewelry store, buying an engagement ring, not for her. "For his new future," Ramos said. "He planned to propose to someone else once you two served your purpose." Ivy's scream echoed down the hallway. But Ramos wasn't done. He leaned forward and whispered, "The worst part, Miss Maddox? The ring was meant for someone neither of you expected." The first headline hit the internet at 6:42 a.m. Pregnant woman assaulted in NYC hospital. Tech exec and influencer implicated. By 7:15 a.m. it was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, morning news programs, TikTok accounts with millions of followers. Within hours, Sarah Whitmore's story had gone national. The public wasn't just outraged. They were furious. An 8 months pregnant woman attacked during a medical appointment, filmed, with the husband laughing in the background. America had found its newest villains, and its newest victim. Crowds gathered outside the NYPD building demanding justice. Influencers made videos denouncing Ivy Maddox. Women across the country stitched together clips saying, "We stand with Sarah." The outrage wasn't just emotional, it was relentless. Within 12 hours, Ivy lost all her brand deals. Within 24 hours, Blake's company released a statement condemning any involvement in violent or fraudulent acts. Within 48 hours, the CEO terminated Blake's contract publicly to save the company's reputation. But the biggest shock came when New York Chronicle released a second headline. Sarah Whitmore identified as heir to Hale fortune. Family confirms relation. The world gasped. A pregnant nurse, assaulted and dismissed by her husband, suddenly revealed as the niece of one of Manhattan's most powerful financial giants. The narrative shifted instantly. She wasn't just a victim, she was royalty, wronged by two people who thought she had no one. Inside the Hale penthouse, staff scrambled non-stop answering calls from reporters, foundation partners, and politicians who suddenly wanted to offer support. Eleanor managed each request with cold precision. "They ignored her before," she said sharply. "They don't get access now." Sarah spent the morning watching the news through her fingers, overwhelmed by the tidal wave of attention. "I never wanted this," she whispered. Jonathan sat beside her, speaking gently. "You didn't choose this fight, but you're not fighting it alone." A soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Cole arrived for a checkup. Sarah relaxed a little as he examined her, listening carefully to the baby's heartbeat. "Strong," he said with a reassuring smile. "Just like his mother." Her cheeks warmed. She didn't know why his voice affected her, but it did. Quietly, gently, profoundly. Meanwhile, Jonathan took a call in the other room. When he returned, his expression was tight. "Something happened?" Sarah asked. Jonathan nodded. "The district attorney has officially taken interest. They're considering elevating the charge from simple assault to aggravated assault on a pregnant woman." Sarah's heart skipped. "Is that serious?" "It's a felony," Jonathan said. "Ivy could face years, Blake too." Sarah swallowed, conflicted. "I don't want revenge, I just want safety." "You're getting both," Eleanor said as she entered, "and you deserve both." Before Sarah could respond, the penthouse intercom buzzed sharply. A security officer's voice crackled through. "Sir, there's a crowd forming outside the building. press, civilians, activists, they're chanting her name. Sarah's breath caught. This is too much. I'm nobody. Why are they doing this? Jonathan placed a hand on hers. You're not nobody, Sarah. You're the voice of every woman who has ever been silenced. She stared at the floor, heart pounding. Eleanor added, and there's one more thing. Sarah looked up. A reporter received a leaked screenshot. Eleanor said softly, a message Blake sent to his coworker months ago. Sarah frowned. What message? Eleanor hesitated, then answered, the one where he planned to take full custody of your baby and cut you out completely. The courthouse steps were swarming with reporters by the time Sarah arrived, shielded by Jonathan's security team. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, voices shouting her name like she was some kind of celebrity. But Sarah didn't feel like one. Her palms were sweating, her breath short, her nerves trembling with a quiet ache. Jonathan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You're not alone. Keep your head high. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Rows of spectators murmured as Sarah entered, some recognizing her from the news, others from the viral hospital footage. Dr. Evan Cole sat quietly in the back, offering silent support, even though he wasn't required to attend. Eleanor sat beside him, her expression razor-sharp. Then the courtroom door slammed open. Blake Harrison was escorted in, handcuffed, wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt and the defeated look of a man whose world had collapsed too quickly for him to comprehend. His eyes darted around until they landed on Sarah. His jaw clenched. Ivy Maddox shuffled in behind him, wrists cuffed, hair unkempt, her glamorous facade reduced to a ghost. She avoided Sarah's gaze, staring instead at the floor like it might swallow her whole. Judge Marquez, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, entered. Court is now in session. The prosecutor began with the assault footage. The courtroom gasped as Ivy's punch played in slow, merciless repeat on the screen. Ivy's voice echoed through the speakers. She's pathetic. She needs to disappear. Sarah squeezed Jonathan's hand, forcing herself to keep breathing. The prosecutor continued. This wasn't a moment of anger. This was intent, malicious, deliberate. Blake's attorney stood, scrambling. Your Honor, my client had no involvement. Marquez cut him off. He laughed as a pregnant woman was attacked. I suggest you choose your words carefully. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Next came the financial crimes. Jonathan's legal team laid out Blake's forged signatures, fraudulent transfers, and company credit misuse. The evidence piles grew until Blake's face turned chalk white. You were stealing, the prosecutor said sharply, and using your wife as a shield. Blake exploded. She owed me. She was supposed to support me. She ruined everything. Judge Marquez slammed her gavel. One more outburst, Mr. Harrison, and I'll hold you in contempt. Ivy looked at Blake in horror. He told me he loved me, she whispered. Blake spat back. You were a distraction, a tool. The entire room recoiled. Then came the final blow. The prosecutor opened a sealed envelope. Your Honor, we have a newly discovered document, one retrieved from Mr. Harrison's motel room. Sarah's heart pounded. This is a petition drafted by Mr. Harrison requesting full custody of the unborn child, citing the mother, Ms. Whitmore, as unfit due to emotional instability. Sarah inhaled sharply, her body trembling. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Dr. Cole stood in the back, fists clenched. Blake sank in his seat, realizing his plan, his future was dying right in front of him. Judge Marquez spoke slowly, each word hitting like a hammer. This alone is grounds for immediate protective action. Blake's attorney stammered. Your Honor, that was never filed. But it was prepared, she snapped, under deceitful intentions. Combined with the assault and financial evidence, I am ordering immediate protective custody for Ms. Whitmore and her unborn child. Sarah exhaled, tears slipping silently. And as for you, Mr. Harrison, the judge leaned forward. Your actions demonstrate a pattern of coercion, manipulation, and calculated harm. The courtroom fell silent. Then Marquez delivered the words that made Ivy gasp and Blake stiffen. I am recommending the DA pursue additional felony charges. But before the judge could adjourn, a bailiff rushed forward, whispering something urgent. Judge Marquez's expression darkened. She looked at Sarah and said, Ms. Whitmore, there is new evidence, something we need to address immediately. Judge Marquez's eyes scanned the urgent note the bailiff had given her. With each line, her expression hardened. Lips thinning, eyebrows knitting, posture stiffening as if she were bracing for an earthquake. Finally, she looked up. "This new evidence," she said slowly, "is not about the assault. It's not about the custody petition. It concerns Mr. Harrison's financial activities." The courtroom murmured, tension crackling like electricity. Blake stiffened in his seat. "Your Honor, I don't know what you're talking about." "Silence," Marquez ordered. The prosecutor stepped forward, holding a thick folder marked "Confidential." "Your Honor, our office has just received authorization to unseal an internal report from Blake Harrison's employer, Prometheon Dynamics. The findings are substantial." Jonathan leaned in slightly, whispering to Sarah, "This is the moment everything breaks open." The prosecutor began reading. "Over the past 18 months, Mr. Harrison secretly rerouted corporate PR funds into personal accounts. These funds were used to pay for luxury hotels, jewelry, celebrity events, and influencer partnerships, all linked to Ivy Maddox." Ivy's mouth dropped open. "What? I didn't know. I thought he had money." "He told me." Her lawyer tugged on her sleeve. "Stop talking." But the prosecutor wasn't done. Additionally, Mr. Harrison created a shadow marketing budget, forging approval signatures from senior executives, placing the company at serious legal risk. Blake turned pale, sweating through his shirt. "This is insane. You can't prove." The prosecutor raised a hand. "We can prove it, because Mr. Harrison left a digital trail. He stored all the forged documents, transfers, and illegal authorizations on a personal hard drive." The judge frowned. "And where was this drive found?" The prosecutor's tone sharpened like a blade. "In the motel room where Mr. Harrison fled after the assault, hidden inside a vent." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Sarah felt her stomach twist. All this time, she thought Blake's cruelty was limited to her. She hadn't imagined he was capable of orchestrating a full-scale corporate crime. The prosecutor continued, "But what's more disturbing, Your Honor, is that included in those files were contingency plans. Mr. Harrison drafted multiple versions of legal petitions, all designed to position himself as the sole parent of the child Miss Whitmore is carrying." Sarah's breath caught. Jonathan's hand tightened protectively around hers. Blake lunged forward, face red and wild. "She was holding me back. I deserved a fresh start. I was trying to fix my life." The judge slammed her gavel. "Mr. Harrison, control yourself." But Blake kept shouting, "She owed me everything. I built her. I kept her. That baby." "Enough," Marquez barked. "Another outburst and I will have you restrained." The courtroom fell silent. Then the prosecutor delivered the final piece. "We also uncovered something else, something that directly involves Ms. Maddox." Ivy swallowed hard, trembling. "What do you mean?" "Several documents show Mr. Harrison planned to shift full blame for the financial crimes onto you, using your social media posts and presence at events to suggest you were the instigator." Ivy froze, eyes wide with betrayal. The prosecutor's voice softened, not with sympathy, but with formal finality. "Mr. Harrison intended to let you take the fall to protect himself." Ivy let out a strangled sob. Judge Marquez straightened, gaze sweeping across the courtroom like a storm. "Based on the evidence presented, I am ordering the district attorney to pursue felony embezzlement charges, felony fraud, and conspiracy charges against both defendants." Blake collapsed back into his chair. Ivy shook, whispering, He used me from the start." But the prosecutor wasn't finished. "Your Honor, one more discovery was made on that hard drive, something the court needs to hear." Judge Marquez nodded. "Proceed." The prosecutor lifted a final sheet of paper, and Sarah could tell instantly from his grave expression, this wasn't just another crime. This was personal. The prosecutor read, "We found a confidential agreement Mr. Harrison drafted, intended to be enacted after the child's birth." Sarah whispered, terrified, "What kind of agreement?" The prosecutor turned to her and said, "One that would have removed you from your child's life, permanently." A silence so heavy it felt physical settled across the courtroom. Even the air seemed to pause, waiting, bracing, for whatever came next. Sarah felt her heartbeat thud painfully in her chest. She clutched the armrest, her knuckles whitening. Judge Marquez folded her hands, tone grave. "Mr. Harrison, removing a mother from her child's life is not a custody dispute. It is coercive control. It is premeditated harm." Blake looked around frantically, searching for someone, anyone, to defend him. No one did. The prosecutor continued, The document was drafted with the intention of having Ms. Whitmore declared unfit after childbirth, using her medical records you plan to manipulate, to strip her parental rights. Sarah felt nauseous. Her breath came in short bursts. She whispered, "He would have taken my baby. He really would have." Jonathan placed a steadying hand on her back, his voice low. "This is why we intervened when we did." Across the aisle, Ivy Maddox sat frozen, eyes hollow with betrayal. Whatever delusion she had left about Blake evaporated. She finally understood the magnitude of the man she'd attached herself to. He told me he loved me," Ivy whispered. Blake spat back. "You were convenient." Judge Marquez slammed her gavel. "Enough." The prosecutor walked forward again. "And one more detail, Your Honor. Blake did not plan to raise the child alone." A ripple of confusion filled the room. Sarah's heart dropped. "What does that mean?" The prosecutor lifted another document. He arranged a private meeting with a potential guardian partner, a woman he intended to move in with after cutting Miss Whitmore out of the picture. Someone willing to raise the child in exchange for financial benefits. Sarah blinked. "A guardian partner?" Jonathan's jaw tensed. "He was replacing you." Ivy shot upright. Who was she?" "He told me I would be the child's mother." The prosecutor handed the document to the judge. Marquez scanned it. Her eyes widened slightly. "It appears," she said slowly, "the woman Blake intended to raise the child with was not Miss Maddox." Ivy choked on a breath. "Then who?" Marquez looked directly at Blake. "Her name is Melissa Grant." The courtroom erupted. Eleanor gasped. "Melissa Grant? That's his coworker, the one who rejected him last year." Jonathan frowned. "So he didn't just want to discard Sarah, he wanted to replace both women." The prosecutor nodded. "Melissa has already confirmed he harassed her and tried to coerce her into a family arrangement she refused." Ivy's voice cracked into a scream. "You were planning a family with someone else? After everything I did for you?" Blake lunged against his restraints. "Shut up. You were never part of the plan. None of you were." Judge Marquez stood, voice ringing like thunder. "That's enough. Bailiffs, restrain him." Two officers held Blake down as he thrashed wildly, shouting half-coherent curses. Sarah stared at him in shock, not fear anymore, but disbelief at how deep his deception ran. How many layers of lies had she lived under? How much had she survived without ever knowing the full danger? Marquez turned to Ivy. "And Ms. Maddox, given your active participation in this assault and the supporting financial evidence, the DA is considering additional charges for conspiracy." Ivy cried out. No, please, I didn't know. He tricked me." "Your ignorance does not erase your actions," Marquez replied coldly. Jonathan leaned toward Sarah. "This is how it ends for people like them. Their lies collapse, and they get buried under the rubble." Sarah swallowed hard, one hand instinctively going to her belly. Judge Marquez took a breath before delivering her final order of the day. "Both defendants will remain in custody without bail pending the next hearing. The risk of flight and further harm is too great." Gasps rippled through the room. But before the judge could dismiss the session, Detective Ramos rushed in, expression tight. He whispered urgently to the prosecutor, who paled instantly. Marquez narrowed her eyes. "Detective, what now?" Ramos straightened and said, "Your Honor, something urgent just happened at the Hale residence. Miss Whitmore needs to hear this immediately." Sarah felt her pulse spike as every pair of eyes in the courtroom shifted toward Detective Ramos. His usually calm face was taut, his breath shallow, as if he had sprinted up the courthouse steps. Judge Marquez lifted a hand. "Detective, speak. What happened at the Hale residence?" Ramos glanced at Sarah before answering. "There was an intrusion." Jonathan shot up from his seat. "What do you mean, intrusion? That building has the best security in Manhattan." Ramos nodded. "Yes, sir, which is why this is alarming. Whoever broke in knew exactly what they were doing." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "My baby's room, my things, are they okay?" Ramos hesitated. "No one was harmed, but someone entered Miss Whitmore's private suite. It appears they were searching for something." The courtroom buzzed with rising whispers. Judge Marquez leaned forward, voice sharp. "Detective, do you have evidence indicating who was responsible?" Ramos opened a folder. His tone darkened. "Yes, Your Honor. Security footage captured a masked individual using a stolen key fob to access the penthouse floor." Jonathan shook his head. "Impossible. Only 5 people have access. Myself, Eleanor, head security Sarah, and..." His voice trailed off. Sarah's stomach dropped. Blake, she whispered. Ramos nodded grimly. We cross-referenced timestamps. The fob used belonged to Blake Harrison. Gasps erupted. Blake shot up, shouting, "That's a lie! I've been in custody for 2 days. How could I?" Marquez glared. "Sit down, Mr. Harrison." But Ramos held up a hand. "He's right about one thing. Blake did not physically enter the penthouse. The footage shows someone smaller, leaner. Movements suggest a woman." Slowly, horribly, everyone turned toward Ivy. Ivy trembled violently. No, I was being interrogated. I didn't leave the station." Ramos shook his head. "It wasn't Ivy." Sarah blinked. "Then who?" Ramos set down another photo. On the screen was a grainy still image from security footage, only the intruder's eyes visible above a mask. But something about the posture, the shadows, the silhouette. Jonathan's face turned to stone. "That's Melissa Grant." The courtroom erupted again. Ivy gasped. "That woman?" "He told me she rejected him." Ramos nodded. "She did reject him, then she quit the company," but he paused. "Evidence suggests Blake kept in contact with her for months. He promised her full custody of the child once Ms. Whitmore was declared unfit." Sarah felt like the world was tilting beneath her feet. "Why would she break into my room?" Ramos sighed. "We believe she was searching for medical documents. Anything that could be used to claim you were unstable or unwell." Sarah pressed a hand to her stomach. "He wanted to build a case to take my baby after birth." Ramos lowered his voice. "And we believe Melissa was helping him long before the assault." Jonathan clenched his fists. "This is bigger than we thought. How many people were involved in Blake's plan?" Ivy whispered, horrified. "He played all of us." Judge Marquez rose, her robe sweeping behind her like a shadow. "I am escalating protective custody for Ms. Whitmore. Effective immediately, she is under 24-hour supervision until the birth of her child. Any individual attempting to contact her will be arrested on sight." Sarah exhaled shakily, relief and fear twisting together. Marquez continued, "As for the defendants, Mr. Harrison and Ms. Maddox will remain in custody with all privileges revoked." Blake lunged forward, screaming. 2 officers slammed him back. Ivy cried into her hands. Ramos approached Sarah quietly. "There's one more thing," he said. "A note was left in your suite." Sarah froze. "A note?" Ramos nodded. He pulled out a sealed evidence bag. "One sentence," he said softly, "written on Blake's stationery." Sarah's blood ran cold. Ramos read it aloud. "The baby will be mine." Sarah didn't sleep that night. Even with security stationed outside her door, even with Jonathan's assurance that Blake and Ivy were locked away, even with the penthouse wrapped in silence, her mind wouldn't settle. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the note. "The baby will be mine." Not a threat, a promise. Jonathan sat beside her on the balcony overlooking Central Park, a blanket around her shoulders to protect her from the night chill. The city glittered beneath them, distant, indifferent, but somehow comforting. "You're safe here," Jonathan said softly. Sarah shook her head. "Safe until he finds another way." Jonathan's voice hardened. "He won't. The DA is building a case that will put him away for a long time, and Melissa, she'll be brought in soon. She's terrified and on the run. That means she'll make mistakes." Sarah lowered her gaze. "Why didn't I see who Blake really was?" Jonathan exhaled. "Because kind people assume others are kind. That's not your failure, it's his." A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Inside, Eleanor prepared herbal tea while Dr. Evan Cole reviewed the baby's latest readings. He had stayed late, far later than required. Every hour, he checked on her without complaint. His presence no longer startled her. It soothed her, like a steady rhythm she could lean on. Around midnight, he stepped onto the balcony. "Vitals are strong," he said, smiling gently. "Your son's a fighter." Sarah placed a hand over her stomach. "He deserves better than the world he's being born into." Evan sat beside her, careful to give her space. "He's being born into a world with you. That alone gives him an advantage." She looked at him then, really looked. The sincerity in his eyes, the softness in his smile. She had grown so used to fear that kindness felt foreign, almost unreal. "Why are you helping me so much?" Sarah whispered. Evan hesitated, eyes dropping briefly. "Because some people walk into your life and you just know they're worth protecting." Heat flooded her cheeks. She didn't know what to say. But before she could find words, Eleanor rushed onto the balcony. "Jonathan," she said, breathless, "the DA's office just called. They're ready to proceed with final indictments. They want Sarah present tomorrow morning to finalize her statement. Sarah nodded slowly. This is it, then. The end? The beginning, Jonathan corrected gently. They all returned inside. Sarah eased onto the couch, exhaustion finally tugging at her. Eleanor dimmed the lights. Jonathan made one last call to security. Evan lingered just long enough to squeeze her hand before leaving for the night. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a hint of peace easing into her chest. She whispered to her son, "We're almost free." But freedom had a way of demanding one last test. Just as she began drifting into sleep, her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Her breath caught. She stared at the screen as it buzzed again and again. Jonathan stepped forward. "Don't answer." But Sarah shook her head, her pulse racing. What if it's the DA? Against her better judgment, she pressed accept and lifted the phone to her ear. Static crackled. A low breath. Then a voice she never wanted to hear again whispered, "You think this is over, Sarah? You think you won?" Her blood ran cold. "Blake." Jonathan grabbed the phone, but the line cut instantly. Sarah sat frozen, heart hammering. Jonathan's voice was sharp. "How the hell did he make that call from a holding cell?" Eleanor paled. "He didn't." Jonathan turned slowly. "Then who?" A message notification flashed on Sarah's screen. One sentence. "See you before the hearing." The morning of the final hearing arrived cloaked in heavy clouds, the kind that made New York feel like it was holding its breath. Sarah woke early, the baby rolling gently under her ribs, as if sensing the weight of the day. Eleanor helped her dress in a soft cream maternity suit, simple but dignified, a symbol of the woman she had become. Jonathan checked the security detail twice. Dr. Evan Cole arrived unannounced, just to reassure her and listen to the baby's heartbeat. "You're both strong," he whispered. "You'll walk out of that courtroom free." But as they made their way toward the private elevator, a guard rushed forward. "Sir, Miss Whitmore, someone attempted to breach the garage entry 10 minutes ago." Jonathan stiffened. "Who?" "We couldn't identify them. They fled before we arrived." Sarah felt fear twist inside her chest. The unknown caller, the message, the threat. "Is it Blake?" she whispered. "No," Jonathan said firmly. "He's in custody, under surveillance. He didn't make that call." Sarah swallowed hard. "Then who wants to scare me?" No one answered. Their convoy descended into the basement garage. Security swept every corner, then signaled all clear. Sarah stepped into the armored SUV, hands trembling. Jonathan sat beside her, Evan behind her, Eleanor across from her. She wasn't alone, not anymore. At the courthouse, reporters surged, but the security detail kept them at bay. Inside, the tension felt even heavier than before. The judge entered. "Bring in the defendants." Blake and Ivy were escorted inside, both handcuffed. Blake looked defeated. Pale, furious, but hollow. Ivy looked broken, mascara streaks staining her cheeks. Judge Marquez began. "Before sentencing, Miss Whitmore has the right to speak." Jonathan touched Sarah's hand. "You don't have to, but if you want to, now is your moment." Sarah rose slowly. The courtroom silenced. She faced Blake first. "You tried to destroy me. You tried to take my child. You lied, manipulated, and treated me like something you owned. But I survived you. I found family, protection, and truth. And now, you face the consequences you created." Blake clenched his jaw but said nothing. Sarah turned to Ivy. "You hurt me because you believed his lies. But you made your own choices, and now you're facing them." Ivy bowed her head, shoulders shaking. Then Sarah looked at the judge. "I don't want revenge. I want safety. I want peace. I want a life for my son free of fear. Whatever sentence protects us, that's what I ask for." Judge Marquez nodded. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore." She shuffled papers, then announced, "For aggravated assault on a pregnant woman, obstruction of medical personnel, financial fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, Blake Harrison is sentenced to 18 years in state prison with no possibility of early release." Blake collapsed back into his chair, stunned. For direct assault, participation in fraud, and aiding conspiracy, Ms. Maddox is sentenced to 8 years in state prison. Ivy sobbed as officers lifted her to her feet. The courtroom exhaled as justice settled into place. Jonathan wrapped an arm around Sarah as she trembled, not from fear, but from release. "It's over," he whispered. "You're free." Outside the courtroom, the sky finally cleared. Light filtered through the clouds like a blessing. As they stepped into the sunlight, Sarah winced suddenly, gripping her belly. Contraction? Evan asked urgently. Sarah nodded, tears filling her eyes. Good ones. Evan smiled wide. It's time. Hours later, in a private suite surrounded by the people who protected her, Sarah held her newborn son against her chest. His tiny fingers curled around hers, warm and perfect. Jonathan whispered, voice thick with emotion, "Welcome home, little Hale." For the first time in years, Sarah felt whole, safe, loved, a survivor who earned her peace. As she kissed her son's forehead, she whispered, "We're free now, and this is our life." End, closed ending. So that's where our story ends, my wonderful friends. And if you're still here with me right now, listening all the way to this moment, then something in Sarah's journey must have touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength, or maybe of pain you've survived. You know, the Stoics used to say, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Marcus Aurelius wrote those words not to sound wise, but to remind us, every wound can become a doorway, every heartbreak can become a beginning. Just like Sarah, we don't choose the storms, we only choose who we become after them. If this story stirred something inside you, even a little, then let's carry that forward together. Let's heal. Let's stand stronger. Let's refuse to let darkness write the ending of our lives. And hey, if you felt seen today, or supported, or understood in any way, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe so you can walk with us through the next story. You matter. Your voice matters, and you're never as alone as you think.